Have you ever heard a musical artist described as having great chops? What does that mean? Well, the term chops is slang in the music business that refers to an artist that has developed great skills over time, whether they are a musician, composer, producer, or other titles associated with the music business. This is Scott Grimaldi, your host of Got Chops. Join me as I interview one musical artist per episode that I've had the pleasure of either performing, recording, or work with in my career. Plus, I'll be interviewing artists I've always wanted to speak with. We'll discover how each artist developed their chops, listen to their stories, and much more. This is Got Chops. My special guest artist for today is a multi-flautist from Paris, France. That's her on the track behind me playing flute, bass flute, and contrabass flute on Paul Smith's composition Nunc Dimittis. Born in Japan, my guest was raised as a child in South Korea, Brazil, and England, and speaks 5 different languages. At 7 years old, she began to play classical flute and continued throughout her college years at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London, England, where she mastered her art. Recognized in France as a chamber musician and soloist, my guest also enjoys playing in a variety of other genres as well. As a multi-flautist, she plays all the various size flutes, ranging from piccolo down to the contrabass flute. In addition, my guest is a Trevor James bass flute artist and an advocate for increasing commission works for the bass flute by living composers. In 2022, my guest released her visual album, Intrinsic, combining her passion for beautiful melodies, extended flute techniques, and breathtaking nature scenes that were filmed at a national park in Brazil. This multi-flautist certainly got chops. Please welcome Daniela Mars. Hi, Daniela. This is Scott from Got Chops. How are you?
Hi, Scott. I'm great. Thank you. I'm very happy that we were able to do this. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Yes, it's been a couple of months that we're trying to coordinate our schedules to do this interview, but I'm really excited to be able to speak to you today and learn all about you and have my listeners, draw my listeners' attention to driving them to your social media to listen to you and buy your music. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So let me ask you, as a musical artist, what does the music slang "got chops" mean to you?
Well, that's funny because I had actually never heard that expression before, and I asked a friend of mine who's British. I asked him, "Have you heard of this expression?" And he said, "Oh yeah, that means it's a good player or someone's playing well." But apparently, you use it much more in America than you do in the UK. But for example, I live in France right now, and I left the UK. How many years ago? Over 10 years ago now, when I was studying there. So yeah, I actually had never heard that expression before, so it's interesting.
So I read that you were raised in Japan, South Korea, Brazil, and England. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite a journey. So where were you born?
I was actually born in Japan, but I wouldn't really say it might. I don't necessarily know my biographies, but I wouldn't really say that I was raised there because I only stayed there for 2 months. So I was a 2 month baby, and then I went to England and then Brazil and then South Korea from 2 to 6 years old. So I stayed 4 years there. Then England, Brazil, and kind of all over. But yeah, I was mostly raised in South Korea, Brazil, and England.
Wow,
Both three.
that's interesting. So you now live in Paris, France, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
How long have you been in Paris?
For about, so in Paris, maybe 5 years, maybe. But in France, actually, no, Paris more like 4 years, and in France, in total, about 7 years.
Okay, so out of all the places that you grew up and lived in different parts of the world, why did you select Paris or in France in general to settle down and work?
Well, for me, since I've been living in I've been moving around my whole life, literally. It's not so hard for me to change countries, I feel. It's not such a huge thing. I mean, it's always a big thing when you change countries because it's the different, usually it's a different language, a different culture, different friends, everything. But I think I might find it easier than most people because for me, it's not, I've been doing that since forever. So it's not really such a big deal. I did want to continue my studies in flute, and France was a good country. I actually was living in Austria, in Vienna at the time when I decided to do that. And so when I moved to France, I made friends here. I really liked the language. I made some really good friends, and I just ended up staying. And it's also very easy to go to different countries from France. I feel like you get a train to Germany. You can also get a train from the center of Paris to the center of London when it takes you about 2 hours and a half. So it's easy to move around as well. It's not like you're stuck. So it's a good place to be. There's so much culture in Europe, I feel like. So it's very interesting. It's a country I enjoy living in.
And it's very beautiful. And yes, the music, especially if you're a flautist like you and I mean, the repertoire is just endless and just phenomenal. Your English,
Oh yeah.
you speak English great. How many other languages do you speak?
Well, English is actually my first language with Portuguese. Even though I have an accent in English, which no one can really pinpoint where it's from because I grew up listening to all different kinds of English. There was the English from my mother, who was Brazilian, and she spoke with an accent. And I went to school when I was in South Korea. I studied in an international school, so there were all these children from all different parts of the world, and my accent just became very mixed, I guess. But I speak 5 languages, but only three fluently. So I speak Portuguese, English, and French fluently, and then I speak some German and Spanish.
That's fantastic. And as a traveling performer, that comes in handy, right?
Yeah, it really does. It really does, especially because I do a lot of projects in Germany, and yeah, that helps a lot.
That's great. So at what age did you begin to play and study music, and was flute your first instrument?
Flute, I would say it isn't. I mean, I would love singing, but instruments it would probably be it was the flute. I was about 7 years old. I was living in the north of England, in York, and yeah, I started there. A friend of mine, she had brought her flutes into the class we had music class, and she brought her instruments, and I fell in love with it. I found it such a beautiful instrument without even having heard it, to be honest. So I found the aesthetic, like, it's just beautiful. And so I went home that night and I told my parents that I wanted to play the flute. And that's how it started, really.
So let me ask you, what music genres and or artists were you inspired by when you were younger?
Oh gosh, it's funny because when I was younger, I wouldn't really listen much to pop music at all. I would love listening to classical music, and I was even embarrassed because on my iPod, the iPod first was coming out, so people were buying them. I practically only had classical music on it, and yeah, I didn't want anyone to know that because they find it weird, when you're a teenager and you're just listening to classical music. But now I listen to absolutely everything. I think I adore Beyonce, I adore Bjork, which are two very contrasting artists. I literally listen to all kinds of music. I listen to pop, I listen to jazz, I listen to rock. Brazilian music I adore as well. Many kinds of world music as well. So yes, yeah, really a lot. I can go on forever.
Share with my listeners the experiences that you had when you studied at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London. And did you receive a degree in classical flute performance there?
So what happened was when I went to university, I chose a degree in which it had the practical side, so like the performance side, but also a more like academic side. And through that, I could only really get that at this university called City University London because they had a partnership with Guildhall. So I got a B-Mus, it's called. It's not a B-Mus performance, but I had all my flute lessons. I had 1 hour flute lesson every week in Guildhall. Or sometimes the teachers would go to our practice rooms, but it was mostly in Guildhall. And the experience there it was great. I mean, you learn a lot. The thing is, I feel like at least when I was in university, it's so different than now. We changed so much afterwards and during because many of us are kind of clueless as to what it is we really want sometimes, and it's kind of scary for certain musicians when you think about how many positions there are in an orchestra job, because sometimes we think that's our only option. It's either teaching or an orchestra job, and you think, okay, how many? It's very hard to get, and is it something really that's going to make me happy? So I would say it was kind of I was kind of anxious about that. Kind of anxious about like during my time as a student, there were a lot of doubts, and but it's important. It was definitely an important period. So my experience was a growing experience, and all that includes when you're growing up.
And I can attest to this, everything that Daniela is talking about. When I was a flute major in college, the competition level is just fierce, right? Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it is. And also some people, because of their own insecurities, can be very mean to each other as musicians, can be very judgy about the sound, or there's not really, sometimes there's a lack of, I don't know what the word is exactly, but when instead of supporting each other, because it's so competitive, people can be a bit too much in their ego or in their insecurities and want to bring others down. So that is also something which I think can happen quite easily when you're in a conservatoire, when you're in a college, which is hard to get into, and yeah, which, I mean, it's natural, but it's not great.
So you are recognized as a chamber musician and soloist in France. What was the appeal of these two musical idioms?
Well, I feel like in chamber music, you have a lot more artistic freedom than when you're in an orchestra, unless you're the conductor, I guess, so the leader of the orchestra. But so I really enjoyed working with other musicians and making artistic decisions together, and it was much more of it just had a really nice vibe, which I liked. Soloist, I've enjoyed performing as a soloist very much as well, but I think chamber music would probably be my favorite. So the appeal was just fun. I guess it all boils down to that.
When I watched you perform on Instagram, that comes through that you're really enjoying the music, you're having a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm glad. Thank you.
My pleasure. You make it enjoyable for the listeners and the viewers, so that's great. As you spoke before, you've always had an interest in contemporary music. So let me clarify. To you, does that mean that you also play jazz and pop styles as well, or are you referring to contemporary classical music?
I was referring to contemporary classical music, although I am getting more into slowly. But I have, for example, played in a bossa nova band, so a Brazilian music band, where I would play flute and I would sing. And I have played some pop music. I've like recorded some pop music for some artists. So I mean, I'm open to everything. Everything's music. I don't look at some things being more, I don't know how to say, elite than others or more higher than others, you know. So I do enjoy all kinds of music. As I've said, I am still getting into improvising. I'm getting there. It's a journey. So I would not be confident playing jazz yet, for example. Even if I played bossa nova, it's quite different, I think.
When you refer to jazz, what artist or instrumentalist are you talking about?
There's a fantastic flutist called Hada. I never know how to, I think it's Neuberg, her last name. She's an artist I really admire, I really like. She's the main one I actually follow. She's my main inspiration, I think.
You are a Trevor James flute artist. How did you become an artist for Trevor James, and does that include you playing and demonstrating for the company their line of piccolos and various size flutes like alto, bass, and contrabass?
So I can't remember what year it was that I became a Trevor James flute artist, but it was because I had asked them if I could borrow a bass flute, actually, because I had made some arrangements which I wanted to record, but I didn't have a bass flute. And so I contacted them and I asked very nicely if it was okay for me to borrow one. And I made some recordings, I made some videos of it, and they really enjoyed it. They really liked it, and they proposed that I became an artist of the bass flute. And so I said yes. It was there was nothing included like you must showcase the flute or you must whatever, but it just meant that I was able to play this beautiful instrument. And as I was exploring more music and doing more different kinds of arrangements, and even for my album, I was recording with an alto flute, a bass flute, and I even had a different kind of head joint called, it's usually called flute with membrane or a dizzy head joint, D-I-Z-I head joint. And so it's, I ended up making one of those kind of head joints from a head joint they gave me. So it's been great. It's been really, even my main professional flute is now a Trevor James flute. So before I used to be only a low flutes artist, but now I play all the flutes. I just don't use their piccolo because I already had a piccolo. And unfortunately, they don't make a contrabass flute, at least not yet. I'm kind of trying to bug them about it because I think it's just amazing.
Yeah, that's really phenomenal that you have a bass flute and you were an artist for that company playing bass flute. Not many flautists, including myself, have a bass flute. I have the piccolo, the flute, the alto flute, but in my line, in my working environment, we only pick up another bigger size instrument if there is the chance, the opportunity to work and to use that. But it's different around the country, which and in the globe, that's what I'm finding out. Do you refer to yourself as a flutist, flautist, or a flute player?
So I usually say, I don't even say flautist, I say flautist usually, because I think that's how you'd pronounce it in England. I never say flute player. I either say flutist or flautist, but mostly flautist, I think.
You probably don't know why I'm asking that, but here in the States, if you're a doubler like myself, besides being a flute major, I was also a saxophone major. So when you're working with other doublers that play sax, flute, clarinet, It depends upon if they're a flute major or just a sax or clarinet major. They'll say, "Oh yeah, I'm a flute player too." But if you're a flute major, as you know, as you said, a flautist or flautist. So, and you can always tell someone that studied at a conservatory rather than a jazz school. So that's why I'm asking that.
Oh, I see. No, but it did seem to be a debate. I used to have a Tumblr blog, which I actually still do. And it was like a debate on Tumblr, like what you should call. And in the end, it doesn't really matter.
So what was your motivation and intention in purchasing and or playing the bass and contrabass flutes, besides being an artist for Trevor James?
So my interest for the bass flute actually became when, well, first of all, there was this piece by Ian Clark called Within, and I had to play this piece. I was obsessed with this piece, and I got all my friends together, and I said, look, this is for 7 flutes. We need an alto, we need a bass. This person has an alto, no one has a bass. So then I ended up buying a bass flute on Amazon, which wasn't very expensive and which was not good quality. It was horrible. I still have it, but it's more like a toy now. It doesn't make much sense. But I actually bought that so that we could do this piece, just because I really wanted to play it. But then this bass flute, when I love the sound. And when I tried to do arrangements using it, my bass flute didn't work. It was always out of tune and it was just kind of broken. So that's when I contacted Trevor James. And then the contrabass flute, I recorded for my album a concerto, which is called the Nola Flute Concerto, and it's for various flutes, it's for various instruments. It's for various flutes and string orchestra. And so that means it's for flutes with membrane, which is that dizzy head drawing I mentioned, bass flutes and contrabass flutes. So I asked this flute orchestra, which I play in now, if they could lend me a contrabass flute. And they asked me, well, why don't you play in our orchestra? So after that, I couldn't really say no. I can't say, okay, no, I don't want to play with you guys, but give me the contrabass flute,
Right.
So I ended up starting to play with them, and I really enjoy the people, really like the people there. So I still perform with them quite a bit, and they've lent me the contrabass flute. I just love the sound. It's funny because all of this came from pieces which needed them, and then I just fell in love with the instrument, and I decided to do more with it.
So I also read that you're an advocate for increasing commissioned works for the bass flute. Share with my listeners your published bass flute project.
Okay, so when I did become a Trevor James flute artist, I wanted to do more pieces on the bass flute, and I had been playing some Baroque pieces, but I really wanted to work with composers and just do new music, play music from living composers. It didn't make sense for me to just be playing this music from people who've been dead for so many years. And so I said on Instagram, guys, if you write me a piece, I will play it I'll do a video, and I'll talk about your website on my Instagram or whatever you want me to. And so I got a few people sending me music in, and it was really great. Then some of the pieces got published with Master Music Publications in London. So yeah, that's how it was going. I'm not sure if I'm gonna continue that. I mean, I've stopped it for a while now, but because it's a lot of work anyway, and I'm quite busy at the moment. But I might get back on that.
That's great. You mentioned before arranging, so I'm assuming that you're also an arranger for things that you write.
It's more so for arrangements, it's things that just I usually enjoyed listening to. So, for example, there are the piece that I arranged a piece by Björk called Unravel. That's actually when I needed the flute. That's when I needed the bass flute, was because I had written an arrangement for 3 bass flutes, and so I loved this piece so much that I did an arrangement for it because I wanted to play it. And then also I did some there's a composer called Paul Smith, and so he usually composes pieces for choir, but I loved his music, and so I did an arrangement of his piece for contrabass flute, bass flute, flute, and alto flute, I believe. So it hasn't been my original compositions, but just the compositions of artists I admire.
Let me tie something in. You just mentioned composer Ian Clarke. On your Instagram, you posted a few videos of you playing flute by this composer called Orange Dawn from your new visual album. So talk about how this project came about and who Ian Clarke is.
So Ian Clarke is an amazing flutist, an amazing composer. So he writes very well for the flute because he's a flutist, and I believe he also, yes, he teaches at Guildhall as well. And I always loved his music. I can't remember what I did a video of his piece called Zoom Tube, and also Beverly. And then I performed Within actually a few times now. And so for my visual album, for me, it was very important to have pieces by living composers. And Ian Clarke is a living composer, and I just love his music. So I chose the piece Orange Dawn to play in my album, to record in my album, because it was also, the whole album was very linked to nature. The whole idea was that every piece would have a video, and every piece would be linked to nature. So Orange Dawn, it was a perfect example because it was even the title is very visual, Orange Dawn and everything. But even in the program notes, he writes down what it is he imagined, and it's all in nature. I think it's an image he imagined in Africa. So it's a fantastic piece.
Yeah, it's very soothing and very relaxing. That's a great concept that you have right now. Could you talk about how you incorporated the extended flute techniques?
You mean how it's incorporated in the piece?
Yes.
So in Orange Dawn, the only extended techniques are these kind of, I would call them like kind of bamboo sounds. It's a different kind of sound, which is you play a note but with different fingerings as the traditional fingerings that you'd use, and it just sounds very airy. So that's the technique which you use in Orange Dawn. But he uses loads of different techniques. For example, in Zoom Tube. In Zoom Tube, there are multiphonics, there's singing and playing, there are microtones. There's a microtonal scale, which is super hard to play. And I don't know if it can be considered like a extended technique, but there's a high F sharp, I believe, which you have to play, I think, 3 times. And I remember when I was recording this, actually, it's funny, because I told my friend at the time I was recording, I said, okay, this part I'm going to have to do many times because it's very hard. And I don't know, the stars aligned on that moment, and I managed to reach that top F sharp like 3 times on the first take. And I was like, okay, let's stop. Let's not do another one. Like, that's it. We're not gonna try again because I don't know if it will happen because it's so hard.
So also talk about the filming of the location and the challenges of filming with a drone on a steep slope. My God.
Oh yes, that was. I felt fine because I was actually barefoot when I was standing, and I had a lot of stability, and I'm used to exploring or just going on adventures in nature. So I'm not scared of heights actually at all. And my mom was much more scared than I was. Like she didn't even want to look at me when I was there, but it was fine. The challenges were getting to the locations for sure because it was super hot, it was super dry, and in the end it all worked out. But it was it was physical. It was we had to walk for quite a lot, and it was a dry season in Brazil, in the states where I'm from. So humidity could go below 10% sometimes, which is very low. But I'm really glad I did it. I mean, I don't regret it at all. It was a lot of work, but I'm happy we managed to do it.
And what made you decide to film with a company that has drones?
So it wasn't really a company. It was more the filmmaker or the videographer. Actually, the he was the boyfriend of my cousin's best friend. So he was just starting with videos, and he managed to give me a good price because he was only just starting, and that helped a lot because I really wanted to be the one to edit the video. So I wanted to edit the video myself, and he would allow me to do that, and I would also make it cheaper. So he had a drone, and so I thought, okay, well, let's use the drone when we can, and if it works, and sometimes it worked really well for some shots.
It was just phenomenally great.
Oh, thank you.
So please talk about your new album, plus being on the cover of a very prestigious flute magazine this past October called The Flute View that included an artist interview about you.
Yeah, so my album is called Intrinsic. It's, as you also mentioned, a visual album with videos for every piece and very linked to nature, which is a big, big passion of mine. So it came out with Voces 8 Records, which I was also very happy about. And it came out on the 30th of September. It was an album which I feel it was so hard to make because it was during COVID. I recorded it in 2021, and I had done the crowdfunding in November 2020, and I had to postpone the recording so many times because I was going to record it in Brazil, and the situation there was just getting worse and worse. So the hall had to close a few times, and then I actually booked the hall twice and it didn't work. And then on the third time, luckily it did work. And so I went and I recorded there, and it was really beautiful to do it in Brazil. It was great to go back home and to see my family. Well, actually, this is quite interesting, at least for me. When I arrived in Brazil, I arrived straight in Rio, and I'm not from Rio. I'm from Goiânia. So for me to arrive back in my country, but in a city which is not mine, where my family's not there, so that I can work, it's almost it's kind of difficult because I miss my country. I wanted to kind of feel at home, and I wanted to see my family. And yes, I was like, oh no, I have to get this done, and then I can enjoy and also have to do the videos. So it was tough. It was something where I really had to go into work mode or just professional mode, as in this is what I'm doing, and I have to concentrate on this now, So after that, after I recorded, I did the videos in this beautiful, I think it's called National Park in Brazil, which is huge, called Chapada dos Veadeiros. And then, it was tough. But it was beautiful. It was really amazing place. I didn't want to leave. And then afterwards, listening to the takes, the editing, all of that, which happens when you have to do an album, which is actually almost harder. I found it so hard to listen to myself afterwards. I was so scared that it wasn't going to be good, and then the takes wouldn't be good enough, and then that was it. I couldn't do anything else. It just wasn't good. Luckily, we did. I did end up being happy with most of the things I did. And so the launch concert was in the beginning. Oh gosh, I can't remember now. It was either beginning of September, and on the 30th of September, the album was officially released on the streaming platforms. It was all there, and also to purchase a physical copy. And so that was on the end of September, and in October, I was on the cover of the Flute View on the Flute magazine, which was fantastic. It was really lovely. They did an interview with me, and I also spoke about my album. So it's been great. I feel like there's still always work to do with the promotion of it and also with sending it out to people. But it's really nice to have this body of work from all of everything that happened, because there are just so many stories, so many things happened to make this album exist, you know.
Well, most people, lay people as we call them, don't really realize what it takes to put together an album, one song, one track, and you're doing a visual album. They just see a little snippet of it when you put it on Instagram. Oh man, that looks great. But if they knew the amount of hours and the amount of money you put out to do this just to take a chance, I mean, of course, it's your first love, but I don't think most people would do what we're doing. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. If many times, if you knew the work it would take, you might not do it. But I mean, I'm excited to. I was excited to do it, and I know it was a lot of work, but I feel like I don't get discouraged by it. I get more. I think, okay, now I have more experience, so if I do another one, it will be easier.
Bravo to you. I mean, that's what it's all about. If you are enjoying what you're doing, that's the main reason we do it. So, in addition to doing all that, tell my listeners about the flute trio that you're a member of called Three Pirouetten.
Oh, yes, I adore this trio because we have so much fun together. We are laughing so much. This actually was a product of COVID. Heine Berger, who's the composer who composes the works of our trio, he actually sent me. He was a follower of mine on Instagram, and he sent me a message. And he said there is a chance I'm going to get a grant to compose some pieces, which I did during COVID. If I get that, would you want to perform them with me? And I just said, if he hears this, he's going to find it funny, because I was like, yeah, sure, of course, I'll do it. And I hadn't really heard his music. He sent me some links. I forgot to look at it. I'd given him my number so he could call me later and tell me more. And so I think a few days later, I get this call from Germany, and I'm thinking, who is this? And I'm like, hello? He's like, hi, Daniela, this is Heine Berger. And I didn't remember. And I was like, oh, hi, just trying to remember who it was. And he was like, did you listen to my music? Did you enjoy it? And I actually lied. I was like, yes, I loved this. It was amazing, because I was too embarrassed.
I was just listening to it.
Yeah, I was too embarrassed to say, oh, I've got no idea who you are. But then in the end, I did listen to it. He explained to me the project, and he asked if I knew another flutist which would be interested and which plays this kind of music. So, of course, what happens when someone asks you that, you're going to invite your friend. You're going to be like, okay, yeah, I've got a great flutist she's amazing. So, and actually, her name is Tihia, and she really does play contemporary music. She's a great flautist, and she plays lots of contemporary music. So I told Tihia, and then he got the grant, and I was like, okay, this is happening. And since in the end things were delayed because of the hall in Brazil for my album, I once had a video call with them, and I said, guys, I'm not going to Brazil again, so let's make this happen. And we managed to book tickets and to record his pieces, and it worked out brilliantly. And the most important, and I can't stress this enough, because everything works so well, so much. It just works so much better when you have a good relationship with the people you work with. Of course, I mean that should be obvious, but I feel like sometimes people forget just how important it is. And the vibe we had, the amount of, like, how easy it was to communicate with each other, that worked so well. And we just kept on doing more projects. We did a tour this summer, and it's just hilarious, really. It's really fun with him, and I love Heine's music. So yeah, I really enjoy it.
The album titles you have on Spotify mention two of your top audio tracks you might want to include from your new visual album as well, or solely that's up to you, that I'll be able to filter in excerpts during this interview in order to give my audience a sense of who you are as a performer.
So I think my top two tracks on Spotify would be "Be Still My Soul," which is a piece by Rhonda Larson. Then there's Lugia's song, I think is the next one. And that was an arrangement I did as well from a Pokemon movie. And it actually, it's got over 100,000 streams on Spotify. I didn't expect it to be that big. From my album, I think the piece which I adore the most, if you can pick favorites in your album, I almost feel guilty, which is strange, but it would be the Nola Flute Concerto, the first movement of it. And I think that would be interesting to hear because it's stunning. It's really stunning music.
As a musical artist, how important is the use of social media to you? I already know the answer, but I have to ask it.
So for me, it's very important because I just met so many lovely people. And that's the thing, it's connections. You know, it's not only about, of course, it's promoting your work, but it's the connections you make from it and the people you meet, even if it is virtually. You can make, like, for example, even the example of my trio. Heine was someone he was following me and he liked my work, and that's why he invited me to record his pieces. But there were many things which came out from that, and even I managed to fund my album thanks to my followers, really. Like they were the ones who really helped me make this album come true, and they're the ones streaming it, I guess. So I find it very, very important, very important. And also the good thing is the good thing is that it's your social media. You're the one who controls what it is you put up out there. So social media you have to use it wisely, I think. It's very easy to kind of get into this like downward spiral or just like mindless scrolling. And sometimes I have to like stop myself even from doing that. I have to be like get off it, practice, because it just, especially with reels now and everything. But it can be a very powerful tool if you know how to use it.
Do you have any musical or life philosophies or catchphrases that you live by?
I do have one, and it's two, I guess. And one of them I put actually in the booklet, kind of in the booklet of my album, because I thanked my father for allowing me to live a life which is true to myself and not to the expectations of others. I think that's extremely important, not only in music, but in everything. Sometimes we make decisions not because it's what we really want or what's really true to our authentic self. It's what we think we want, what we think other people will want to see from us. So I think that's extremely important. Also, I would say especially as an artist, because our work comes so much from ourselves and our artistic soul, So it's important to stay true to that. And the other one, it might seem a bit, I don't know, not contradictory, but I always think to myself, there's more to life than music. I mean, I obviously adore music. But I don't want it to be. It's not the only thing, Sometimes we only have musician friends, and we're only thinking about how much time we have left to practice that day, or it can be just our whole universe sometimes, and we can just create this bubble, and it can be we put so much pressure on ourselves in so many different ways, and even when we're spending these hours practicing, and then we have a concert and we are unhappy with how we played in the concert, so we're upset, that can happen so easily when we're super critical and just thinking about that or just being in that world. So I would tell myself that, because that kind of puts the weight off, and it helps us a lot. And I think even when we do learn about other arts, not just music, or have other experiences, that adds to the artistry anyway of the person.
That's great, and a very healthy thing to say, and very wise. I wish I had more of that in myself when I was younger, because like you just said, you beat yourself up. It wasn't good enough. I didn't like it. If only I did it again, I'll never get hired. That's very tough to break. When you get older, it does become easier because, people know of you. You have a name for yourself. And when you remind yourself of that, like, oh, yeah, I know what I'm doing. Okay. I still might not like what I did, but if they like it, that's what we have to trust.
I teach a lot of children. Many of my students, they started the flute with me. And that actually really helped me fall in love with the instrument again when I was having one of these times where I was just too much in it and too critical of everything, because they look at the instrument like it's the most beautiful thing. They're excited to play it. And then it reminds me how I was when I was their age. And yeah, it's that children also help when you think about it. And you just to remind yourself how you were and why it was that you started to do music.
Let's talk about any upcoming live performances or projects that you'd like to announce.
Well, in May 25th, I will actually be in the States. I'm going to be playing the world premiere of a flute concerto by Philippe Treuil. He is an American-French composer, and he's currently writing me a flute concerto. I actually received a message from him as I was talking to you. A message from him came up, because we're talking about it every day to change things or what could be better. So that's really great about working with living composers. And so that's going to be quite big, because I really can't wait to premiere it. But also I'm still working things out schedule wise, because organizing a tour is so much work. But I'll probably also be in Sacramento. I'll be around California, but the concerto will be in the Dimena Center in New York on the 25th of May. That's for sure.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm in New Jersey. That's right next to New York. So I'm sure I'll see this on your social media, but please, remind me also as we get closer. If I'm not working, I'd love to take my wife and watch you perform. That would be incredible.
Oh, it'd be so great to meet you and her. That would be amazing.
Oh, thank you. So, where can my listeners find you on social media besides Instagram?
I have started a TikTok account because my friends were just pressurizing me. So you can find me on just Daniela Mars flute. On Instagram, no, on Facebook, sorry, you can find me on just Daniela Mars. I have a YouTube channel as well. My website, danielamars.com. So yeah, I think that's everything. I don't really use Twitter that much, but I'm there. Oh, and of course Spotify, just Daniela Mars. You can find me on Spotify, Deezer, Tidal. You can find my music there, my albums all over there.
Well, Daniela, thank you so much for granting me this interview and your precious time. You're a great performer. You have a very interesting lifestyle. All the best to you on the new visual album, all your Spotify tracks, all your social media. We could see you constantly in playing, and your trio and teaching, of course. Everything you do is absolutely great, and I'll continue following you, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you in the States in May. If
Yeah, that would be brilliant. I'll definitely let you know. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It was great to talk to you too.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you so much. Okay, Daniela, have a great day. I hope to speak with you real soon. Take care now.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much for joining me on today's show. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and could hear why my guest got chops. You can follow my podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Anchor.fm, and stay connected between episodes on Instagram at Got Chops Podcast. Join me on the next episode when we discover why my next guest got chops.